Welcome to today's video on how to lose weight regardless of your age. Whether you're in your 20s, 40s, 60s, or 80s, these tips and techniques can help you maintain a healthy weight. People often say, Pete, you're lucky that you're so thin. Well, I just want to let you know it's not luck. It requires a lot of hard work. I weigh myself daily, I adjust my diet and exercise on a regular basis, all to maintain fitness and a healthy weight. And it definitely gets harder the older I get. I've got less energy than I used to, so I can't be as active as I used to. I've got some physical limitations, and my metabolism has slowed down. So all those things make it harder to maintain a healthy weight. You might be thinking, Pete, that might work for you, but it's not going to work for me. Well, I don't blame you for thinking that, but I did have an opportunity recently to run a little experiment, and I was able to test out these same principles with my 80-year-old mother, and the results were very positive. I considered the experiment a success. Mom lost weight. A month later, Mom had kept that weight off, so that was great. I also lost 5 pounds. As I was growing out this beard, someone said that I reminded them of the Gorton's fishermen. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't see any resemblance. Do you? Would you like some cod fillets? Hey, there's some writing on this fish. It says, subscribe to my YouTube channels, websites, and Facebook groups. I've made it easy by including links in this video's description. I don't know, sounds kind of fishy to me.
Trust the Gorton's fisherman.
Ah well, I guess in that case you probably should subscribe. Stay tuned until the end, where I'll share recipes, a meal plan, and other resources that'll help you maintain a healthy weight. Like many of the things I talk about in my videos, maintaining a healthy weight and staying fit are about 80% behavior and only 20% head knowledge. So I'm going to go over the head knowledge, but the rest is up to you. It is so important that we maintain our fitness and a healthy weight throughout our lives. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about why that's important at different stages of life. When you're in your 20s and 30s, what you're really doing is investing in your overall quality of life and in the future. I was surprised to find that something called disc degenerative disease, or DDD, can actually start affecting people in their 20s. That's something that started affecting me in my 50s, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later. And if you're in that age range of 20s and 30s and you still don't think it's important to maintain a healthy weight and your fitness, then stay tuned. I'll explain more about what happens as you get a little older. You might notice that I'm wearing a new shirt now. And what I'm trying to do is just support my two boys. My eldest son just graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering, summa cum laude, from NC State University. And my younger son just started in industrial engineering at NC State. So very proud of them, and just want to say, go Pack. Did I get that right? Nope. Go Pack. Willpower and perseverance are key to success with this and many other things in life. So if you want to learn more about how to develop those attributes, watch this video. The other principle that really helps is keep it simple for success, and I'll show you throughout this video how I've applied that. Before we jump in, I want to share a quote from someone who I respect a lot. She said, "No cookie tastes as good as it feels to be thin." Now, I might argue that thin is the wrong word there. I think I would say probably maintain a healthy weight, but the principle's the same. There's that momentary pleasure from eating something yummy and decadent, but the long-term effects are negative. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of background to set up this situation. So I am relatively fit. I play volleyball, I go hiking, I go biking, I lift weights, I do things like that. But I'd gained a little bit of weight over the last year or two, I think, as I get older and my metabolism slows down and things like that. So I've gained a little bit of weight. And then about 3 months before this big experiment, my mom came for a visit and we noticed some things. Number one, she was having a very hard time getting up from chairs. Shortly after this visit, my mom had a doctor's appointment and they weighed her and they found that she had gained 35 pounds in the last 12 months. So something had to change. Okay, let's set up the experiment. First, the hypothesis. My hypothesis was that regardless of age, the same principles can be used to maintain a healthy weight. To test or prove our hypothesis, we have to define an experiment. So I was going to spend a week to 10 days with my mom at my sister's house. So it was just going to be the two of us. I'd have a pretty controlled environment. And I thought, okay, let's see if we can make any headway on the weight loss. So I applied the same things that I use in my own daily life to maintain a healthy weight. And one of the key elements of that is a zone diet. There's a book called The Formula, which talks about this zone diet, which we've been using for probably 25 or 30 years. And I'll pop up a definition here of what the zone diet is. But my understanding is one of the basic principles has to do with controlling insulin spikes. You maintain a certain ratio of carbohydrates, fat, and protein to prevent your insulin from spiking, because when your insulin spikes, then that causes your body to store sugar as fat. If you look it up, it's mentioned as one of the fad diets, but from my perspective, it always kind of made sense. There seemed to be a little bit of common sense to it. When you're dealing with some of the other diet fads, those to me seemed potentially dangerous and unsustainable because you're forcing your body into a state that is sort of not natural. Whereas with the zone diet, you're just trying to mediate things and moderate those insulin spikes to prevent fat accumulation. So it just seemed to be a little bit more sustainable. It wasn't quite as extreme in terms of what you can and can't eat. Regardless, the zone diet combined with regular exercise has helped our family of 5 maintain healthy weights for many years. Despite a childhood obesity epidemic in the United States, our 3 kids, who are now young adults at 20, 22, and 24, all still maintain healthy weights. And I'm within 15 pounds of my college weight. So personally, I've always found the zone diet to be very helpful in maintaining a healthy weight, and I'd recommend it, as well as the book The Formula, which is specifically about the zone diet. I think for our experiment to be official and sanctioned, we probably should define some terms. And the main term is healthy. And this is something that we've had discussions about in our own household, because when our kids were younger, and my wife and I, of course, would talk about health and eating, and we would, eat considerably lighter fare than what we would serve to our kids, we would use terms like healthy or not healthy. And sometimes the kids would ask us like, "Oh, mom, should I eat this? Is it healthy?" And the thing there is that healthy is a relative term, right? So what's healthy for a 57-year-old male is not the same as what's healthy for an 80-year-old female or a 12-year-old kid. So you have to be a little bit more specific in your terminology. Healthy is not really the right term because a lot of things can be healthy, but they might be unhealthy for certain people in certain phases of life or in certain circumstances. For example, high calorie is not healthy for my mom or for me anymore because that's going to cause me to have weight gain, and that has with it all kinds of other negative health repercussions. That doesn't mean that foods like butter and olive oil and even the occasional cake are unhealthy. It just means that high calories are not healthy for me at this stage of life. So we had to have those discussions. And, again, I don't think butter is unhealthy, but I don't think I should have a lot of butter at this stage of my life because it's a lot of calories that I can't afford. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, let's talk about keys to success for this experiment. Number 1 is to use light versions of all dairy items, condiments, and dressings. That's very important. And I'll give you a little trick here because, some people think that the light versions of these products can be inferior and they just, don't like them. That may or may not be the case. I think some people go a little extreme in what they think is a big difference. I personally am a huge dairy monster. I love sour cream, milk, cottage cheese, pretty much you name it, dairy, cheese. I love it. I mentioned that I'm a dairy monster and that I love condiments, and people are probably wondering to what extent I mean that. It's pretty serious. For example, I'll eat a lot of foods just to convey those things, and if I don't have the condiment, I won't eat those foods. So, for example, for sweets, I eat sweets because I love to drink some cold milk afterwards to clear my palate. That is just such a wonderful flavor and feeling to me. And I eat French fries because then I can take those salty French fries and have those slightly sweet ketchup on there. And another example is that I love sour cream. So, what do you do when you get to the bottom of a bag of potato chips? Well, what I do, and the stuff at the bottom of the potato chips, okay, I call this stuff chip dust, right? And you can see it's pretty small fragments, but I don't even care. It can get even smaller than that. I'll literally take the bottom of the bag, and then I take my handy dandy sour cream, and I just sprinkle those little chips in there. Instead of taking a chip and dipping the sour cream, I'll just sprinkle those in there, get a nice spoonful. That is heaven. So anyhow, yes, I'm a bit of a dairy monster. And what I've found is that the light version of almost all dairy products is virtually indistinguishable from the full fat version, except that it doesn't have full fat. So I exclusively use the light versions of these products. And if you think there's a huge difference, then I would recommend that you try some different brands. And you could also try a trick that my mom used to help transition us when we were kids from 2% milk to 1% milk. And what she did basically is just mix them, right? So she had a gallon that was 2% milk, and we drank some of that, and then she'd add some 1% in there, and we drank some of that, and she'd add some 1% in there until eventually we got used to 1% milk. And it can make a huge difference in total caloric intake over a long period of time. It always amazes me what we can get used to. If you reduce the salt in your diet, then you'll eventually get used to that. And when you go out to a restaurant and have sort of normally seasoned food, it'll taste very salty to you. Same thing with sugar and sweetness. So if you're a food snob when it comes to a particular high calorie food, then I would challenge you to give it a try for an extended period of time. I mean, it's amazing. I even was able to shrink my stomach by eating smaller quantities over an extended period of time. It took weeks. I mean, it didn't just happen overnight, but it was amazing the effects of shrinking my stomach. And then when I would eat, I was satisfied a lot faster. And so I would eat smaller quantities. Now I'd like to share a little story about my wife and milk. My wife doesn't like dairy at all. She doesn't like to eat cheese. She thinks it's disgusting, although oddly, she likes the consistency of cheese. So, if given the chance, she likes to cut cheese. And I'm not really joking about that. She does like to cut cheese. And in terms of dairy, really, ice cream is the only thing that she likes to eat. But all other dairy, she really doesn't want to. And we used to keep water cold in the refrigerator in something that looked like a half-gallon milk jug, but it was water. And, she'd just grab that and drink it. And one time she wasn't paying attention and she went and grabbed a jug and started chugging it and was like, that is the worst tasting water that I've ever had. And it was because it was skim milk. And I think that's pretty funny. In addition to being sort of a dairy monster, I love condiments, whether it's mayo, Miracle Whip, ketchup, whatever. I just love condiments. And so I wanted to provide this tip. Mustard is a great 0-calorie condiment. And we have a friend who has a Mustard Man YouTube channel where he's done all kinds of taste tests, putting mustard on different kinds of foods, even in ice cream.
Oh man.
It's kind of weird, but also kind of weirdly entertaining. So if you want to check it out, the link is in the video's description. Out of sight, out of mind. This is a principle I employ myself all the time. If I'm walking through the kitchen and there's a piece of cake sitting there or something sweet, even if it's not something that I particularly want to have, it kind of gets my mind thinking about sweets or thinking about something desserty, and it's just bad. So I'll put it away or I'll cover it with a towel, just get it out of sight. And in terms of my mom, what I found was she would eat the things that were available and that she saw. So if there was peanut butter and bananas and bread sitting on the counter, she'd have a peanut butter banana sandwich, which is probably one of the worst things that you can have because there's a ton of calories in that. Another key is diet plus exercise. One or the other might help you lose a little bit of weight, but really to sustain it and to really change your lifestyle, you need to have both diet and exercise. Sustainability. It doesn't help if you figure out something you can do for a month or whatever, lose some weight, and fall back into old behaviors and lose all your gains, or rather gain all your losses. And finally, it's very important to have realistic expectations. My goal was to help my mom lose weight, but she's been heavy her whole life, so I don't think she's ever going to be thin. But we can help her get to a healthier weight than she's at currently. Okay, let's talk about the diet aspect of this experiment. Number one, keep it simple for success. So I prepared all our meals and served my mom. And that in itself is probably not sustainable, but this was an experiment, and I wanted to see if preparing these things would help her lose some weight. Mom and I had a lot of salads as part of our diet, and I have a couple tips on how to make that the most effective possible. So number one is you have to buy zero or low-fat dressings. You just cannot slather some nasty dressing or cheese onto a nice healthy salad. And then the second principle is whatever dressing it is you do have, even if it has a few calories, toss it in ahead of time, right? If you're pouring it on, then you're probably going to end up with much more salad dressing than you want. But if you put a little bit in advance, toss it to evenly distribute it, then the flavors all throughout the salad. And honestly, most of the time my mom was happy with that, and it resulted in us both consuming a lot less salad dressing and a lot fewer calories. And as I mentioned in our keys to success, out of sight, out of mind. And that involved putting away the peanut butter, the bread, the bananas, and also the butter. My sister typically has a plate with nice soft butter on it. And for the most part, my mom ate everything I gave her as is. But there was one meal where I made some nice roasted broccoli and she proceeded to slather butter all over it. So she took my nice healthy roasted broccoli and turned it into a calorie bomb. So after that, I put the butter back in the refrigerator and we didn't have any further issues. Now, incidentally, I will say that roasted broccoli is delicious. It's by far my favorite way to eat broccoli, much better than steamed broccoli, in my opinion. So I would definitely recommend that if you'd like to give it a try. If you're paying attention, you might have noticed that I've got a calorie bomb behind me here on the shelves. It's this box of Twinkies. And I've got this out here for a couple of reasons. Number one, it brings back fond memories. When I was a kid and I'd go over to grandma's house, she always had Twinkies and Snickers bars in the freezer. And if you haven't tried them, I'd highly recommend it. Frozen Snickers, frozen Twinkies are pretty awesome. And the other reason is because I'd heard many years ago that these things never go bad. So when my kids were born, I thought, oh, it'd be kind of fun. Let's buy each of them a box of Twinkies. So I've got written on the back of this box, bought for Sylvia, 224 of 2001. You were 10 days old. And it says, they say these things stay good forever. I guess we'll find out. Love, Dad, aka the Nutty Professor. I don't really remember calling myself that, but why not? Now let's talk about the exercise side of this experiment. And again, starting off with the KISS principle, keep it simple for success. Our goal was to go for a 1 mile walk each and every day. We didn't try to complicate it with exercises because then I would have to teach my mom those exercises and how to do them correctly. She would have to remember to do those exercises. So I just thought going on a walk every day was very simple. It was not very far. It was a little bit difficult for her because we're in the middle of summer and, being overweight, it makes it extra uncomfortable and hot for her. But we also found some ways to get around that. When it was really hot, we'd go walk indoors. And when we could walk outdoors, we got some things like a cooling towel and a little portable fan and things like that. And we always made sure to go as early or late as possible when it's a little bit cooler. Now, with respect to the heat, I think it's important to emphasize never give up, right?
Never give in. Never give in. Never, never, never.
No matter what it is you decide to do for diet or for exercise in this case, do it, be consistent, and when you hit obstacles, figure out solutions, right? So my mom doesn't like to go walking when it's cold and icy outdoors. She doesn't like to go walking when it's roasting hot outdoors. Well, you still have to get exercise, so what's the solution? We found a local community center with an indoor walking track, and so on days when it's too hot or too rainy or too cold, then we can go to that community center and get in our mile of walking. Okay, so that was our experiment. Now let's get into the discussion. We weighed ourselves at the beginning of the week and at the very end of the week, not during the week. Whereas when I'm at home, I weigh myself every single day because I want to know how I'm tracking, and I'd rather make small adjustments on a day-by-day basis than have to make larger adjustments on a weekly or monthly basis. And when we weighed in at the end of the week, we had each lost 5 pounds. In fact, my mom had actually lost a little bit more than 5 pounds, but that can be accounted for by time of day or how much you had had to drink recently and things like that. So I just figured I'd round it down to about 5 pounds. And as I said, I also lost 5 pounds. I considered the experiment a success. Mom lost weight. A month later, Mom had kept that weight off, so that was great. Conclusions. So what sort of conclusions can we draw about this experiment? Well, I think number one is no matter what your age, you can maintain a healthy weight and you can maintain fitness, following the same principles whether you're in your 20s, 40s, 60s, or 80s, or anything in between those age ranges. One of my conclusions is that regular weigh-ins help you course correct rather than having a bigger problem to deal with less frequently. Letting it go for an entire year and waiting for a doctor's appointment to check the weight kind of let that weight sneak up on us. And neither of us really knew that that was happening. So having a little bit more frequent weigh-ins is definitely helpful. And the final conclusion is this. The principles are simple, but the discipline to do them consistently over time is harder. But it's not impossible, especially if you turn those into regular habits. Okay, now I'm going to go through some of the recipes and my grocery shopping lists from this experiment. And I want to let you know I'm not going to go into all of the detailed explanations of how the formula works and how they determine portion sizes. There's a lot of great information in that recipe book, and I would really encourage you to go ahead and buy that book. It only costs like $12. So rather than me trying to reproduce all that information, it's really worth the investment. And I'm only sharing a handful of recipes. There are hundreds of recipes. And you never know if you're going to like the same recipes that we did or if you're going to like some different recipes. You can see that things are broken down by breakfast and then lunch and then dinner. And I'm a big fan of repeating things whenever possible, right? I mean, if you're trying to come up with some creative an original menu every single day, then it's an awful lot of work. So if you find things that work, you just repeat them. And of course, you can mix things up periodically. But for my personal preference, I'd rather keep doing the same things over and over again, especially the things that I like. So I know I like eggs and fruit. I know I like a strawberry smoothie. Those are staples that have worked well for our family for literally decades. So I just thought, okay, for breakfast, I'm going to alternate those two things. And then for lunches, similarly, I eat a lot of salads. In fact, when I'm here in Raleigh, I'm eating a salad almost every single day for lunch. But the cocoa peanut butter shake is something that our family loved for many years as well. And so I thought for mom, I'd go ahead and weave a few of those in there as well. And then for dinners, I got a little bit more creative. And some of these are not even zoned recipes. For example, let's see here. So the rub chicken is not a zoned recipe. The chicken and brown rice is not a zoned recipe. But what I mean by that is that they weren't in the formula cookbook, but they were fairly zoned in terms of their composition, right? So they kind of followed the guidelines of the zone pretty closely. 40% carbohydrates, 30% fat, 30% protein. So I always try to, get as close as I can to that. And I think one of the things to remember with the zone diet is that it's easy to get enough carbs, right? I mean, you can just take a couple breaths of air and probably get your 40% carbs. The big challenge is on the protein and the fat. And so I usually just try to, keep carbs as much as possible out of my menu. And then I go heavy on the veggies and the proteins. So anyhow, you can kind of see that here. But I did incorporate some of my favorite recipes that I use when I'm trying to watch my weight and that I think are pretty close to the zone diet. So let's talk a little bit more about some specific things here. So the strawberry smoothie is something that's easily scalable. So literally for many years, our family of five would have strawberry smoothies for breakfast once or twice a week. And you could easily make enough smoothie in the blender for five people, and we'd just divvy that out. Eggs and fruit is kind of what it says. But what's important there, if you're following the recipe, is that it's not just pure eggs. You're also adding some egg whites to give you more of a protein balance and less carbohydrates and fat. And then the type of fruit also matters. So if you're following the zone diet, they're advocating for low glycemic index products. And what that means is the glycemic index is how much it causes your insulin to spike. So some things like pure granulated sugar cause an immediate spike. Things like white bread, those are very basic carbohydrates and they cause immediate spikes in your insulin. So if you go with alternatives like whole grains or just avoiding bread altogether, the same thing for sugar. So while granulated white sugar is a very high glycemic index, if you get fructose, which can be used basically interchangeably, it's derived from fruit, then that has a lower glycemic index. That can be very helpful in maintaining healthy blood sugar levels and avoiding those insulin spikes. So I always just figure, it's easy to get the carbs, and I'm going to focus on reducing the glycemic index of the things in my menu and avoiding those carbs as much as possible. Okay, so that's breakfasts. And that worked pretty well. And the other thing I like about the strawberry smoothie is that you could make it ahead and freeze it in the freezer and then eat it kind of like ice cream or like a frozen shake. And it's delicious either way. So that's kind of handy. Looking at our lunches, I mentioned salads earlier. And again, the key with salads is, there are salads and there are salads. I remember back in the day, the big salad craze and everybody was eating salads to be healthy. But then it turned out that they were putting bacon bits all over it and they were slathering it with full fat dressing to the point where even though it was mostly veggies, it was still a calorie bomb. And it was not what I would call healthy per se if you're trying to minimize calories or maintain a healthy weight. So with salads, stick with nice veggies, use low fat or zero calorie dressings, and use them sparingly. And don't add something like cheese or bacon to a salad. There are some bacon bits you can get, which, if you sprinkle them lightly, don't add a ton of calories. And I have done that before. You can also use croutons, but you need to be careful which kind you get, right? Because some of them are very heavy carb and very heavy fat. So make sure you get croutons that are relatively low fat, low calorie, low carb. This is one of my other hacks. I love to have croutons on my salad. In fact, I think if I wasn't having something like a crouton or something crunchy, I probably would have gotten tired of salads a long time ago and stopped eating them. But if I can have a little bit of crunchy something along with my salad, then it just really keeps my interest. To keep eating to be able to keep eating salads, I found some croutons that are not too high in fat, not too high in carbs. And I love these. They're great. But then, as is often the case, the way they're packaged, the croutons are just way too big, right? I mean, who wants to eat croutons that size? I mean, yeah, sure, I'd love to eat them, but that is not going to be very calorie conscious. So what I found as a hack is I can just take them and with this rolling pin, break them into smaller pieces. And I'm actually perfectly happy with these smaller pieces of croutons. Now, the other thing I do is that I don't just pour these into my salad because I don't really like them when they get soggy. And so what I'll do instead is I'll just have these in a little bowl or on a plate on the side, and I'll eat some salad, and then I'll have a little bite of crouton, and that keeps my interest and allows me to keep eating these great, healthy, low-calorie, calorie-conscious salads. Okay, so as I mentioned, lunches are pretty simple, alternating between salads, the cocoa peanut butter shake, and then some leftovers from dinners that we'd made. Now, with the dinners, I got a little bit more creative. And this first recipe is a rubbed chicken with oven roasted broccoli. The nice thing about this is, you eat this for dinner, and then if you want to, you can cut up this chicken and put it in your salad the next day. What I'll sometimes do too is make a chicken salad out of the leftover chicken breast. Okay, the next thing you see here are beef kebabs with sauteed peppers and onions. And the beef kebabs are actually a zone recipe. Sauteed peppers, I mean, that's just what it sounds like. I just cut those up and saute them in a pan. The key there is, though, don't do it in a ton of oil or butter, right? I usually end up using a olive oil spray to minimize that. Pork chops and applesauce also can be a very nice, healthy dinner. When it comes to the applesauce, make sure you get unsweetened, just natural applesauce. Chicken and brown rice, not a zone recipe, but I thought pretty good. And the other thing to remember with maintaining a healthy diet and minimizing those insulin spikes are using low glycemic index foods. And brown rice, for example, has a lower glycemic index than white rice. So, always a good choice. And I figured that this recipe was pretty close to being zoned. So I made that and everybody really enjoyed it. Steak and cauliflower. So again, pretty simple. Leftover chicken with brown rice, burgers, barley, and salad, right? So, barley, again, it's another grain that has a lower glycemic index than the ones you typically think of. So, I love using barley in recipes, and it's a very satisfying thing to eat. And then over here in dessert, you don't want to completely deprive yourself of something sweet, especially if you have a sweet tooth like I do. There's this pudding. It's called silken tofu chocolate pudding. That is a zoned recipe. It's in the formula book, and we love it. It's really nice. Our kids even enjoyed it. It doesn't taste exactly like chocolate pudding, but it's pretty yummy. And I would recommend you give it a try. Just a couple comments on my sample grocery lists. These are the lists I actually used to shop during the week I was there. Fructose is a low glycemic index sweetener and a substitute for granulated sugar. While we used to be able to find that in the grocery stores like Whole Foods, I haven't been able to find it in any grocery stores recently. So more recently, I've been ordering this online through Amazon, and I've got an affiliate link with a product if you want to buy it there and help support my channel. Now, everything else here I was able to find in the grocery store. And for example, here the salad dressing, I was looking very specifically for low calorie or zero calorie variants of salad dressing. I was happy to see they had a fat free ranch, which I actually can't find here in Raleigh, but I was able to find it there in Indianapolis. So that's a great dressing. Some of the other things here, you'll see I got 1% milk. Some grocery stores even have 0.5% milk. And, so if I can find it, that's what I'll get. Light sour cream, Greek yogurt. I'm sure everybody knows at this point, but Greek yogurt is a higher protein alternative to traditional yogurt. So if you're going to have yogurt, then that's probably a good one to get. Now, you do have to be careful when you're buying yogurt because a lot of yogurt has been sweetened and can be high calorie, but you can find artificially sweetened or low calorie versions of it. Regarding artificial sweeteners, I personally try to stay away from them. And my understanding is that they cause problems typically when used in large quantities over a very long period of time. So I think it's important to recognize that at a certain age, the risk of consuming all those extra calories and the other health problems that being overweight can cause outweighs the risk from the artificial sweeteners. Almond milk. Now, I don't drink almond milk, but it's much lower calorie than milk, and so I will use it in the cocoa peanut butter shake instead of milk. It's up to you. That's sort of a fine thing, saves you maybe 100 calories per serving or something like that. But I like it just fine, so I'll use it for that. For the eggs and fruit dish, I was trying to find things that were simple, right? Because, if I'm preparing all the meals and I'm doing this for my mom and I was trying to think ahead with my sister, I want it to be convenient and as easy as possible. I'm just looking through here. So here you've got light Miracle Whip. That's sort of one of my condiments of choice. This is one of my weight loss hacks. It's this canned chicken breast, and I like to mix that up with the Miracle Whip Light. And it's so high in protein, so low in fat and carbohydrates that it's just wonderful and totally zoned. So I'll eat that with some low glycemic index fruit or with a small handful of pretzel chips or something like that, but just, not a ton of carbs. Anyhow, that is one of my hacks. I've also recently started to have Duke's Light Mayonnaise, which has something like half the calories of regular Duke's mayonnaise. It is so important that we maintain our fitness and a healthy weight throughout our lives. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about why that's important at different stages of life. When you're in your 20s and 30s, what you're really doing is investing in your overall quality of life and in the future. I was surprised to find that something called disc degenerative disease, or DDD, can actually start affecting people in their 20s. That's something that started affecting me in my 50s, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later. But if you start developing disc degenerative disease in your 20s, then you're setting yourself up for problems later in life, and it's irreversible. So very important to beware of these things even early in life. Also in your 20s and 30s, I can remember running into people in their 30s and 40s who had permanent injuries and chronic pain because they hadn't maintained their fitness. They did something and injured themselves severely. So I always wanted to avoid that, and that was a big motivation for me staying fit and active my entire life. And if you're in that age range of 20s and 30s and you still don't think it's important to maintain a healthy weight and your fitness, then stay tuned. I'll explain more about what happens as you get a little older. In your 40s and 50s, if you're not staying healthy, then you might develop type 2 diabetes. You could succumb to weekend warrior syndrome. And basically what that is, if you don't have your whole body at a certain level of fitness, and then you go out and try and engage in an activity or do some work outside or a sport, like let's say you used to play basketball when you were in your 20s, you go out in your 40s and you start playing basketball. Well, your memory is going to remember all the things you could do in your 20s, but your body is not going to react the same way. And you might just set yourself up for an injury, one that could be permanent. I remember very clearly I was playing volleyball one time and there was a new player came out to join us, and he hadn't played in quite a few years, came out, and within 5 minutes, he was laying flat on his back. Luckily, one of the ladies there with us was a physiotherapist, and she was able to help him get to his car. But someone had to drive him home, and I never saw him again. So, it's very sad, but that weekend warrior syndrome is a real thing. And then also in your 40s and 50s, you can develop further your disc degenerative disease and chronic pain, which means pain that's going to last forever. And basically, you just have to manage. It can't be cured. And that's something that I'm suffering with despite having led a fit and active life. So, that disc degenerative disease is inevitable for, I think, everybody. It's just part of the aging process. Whether or not it's going to cause you pain varies a lot from individual to individual. Some don't experience any pain. Some do for a short period of time. I've been having pretty serious pain for a couple years, and I've gone through a lot of diagnostic procedures and some procedures to try and address the pain, but they're not solving the underlying problem. There's no way to make those discs healthier than they currently are. And sometimes you get a little bit of arthritis that is building up on the vertebrae, which closes in on the nerves that pass through there. And that's what causes the pain, right? So it's just some impingement on the nerves. And without surgery on your spine or spinal fusion, there's really no great solutions to that. And that's something that personally I don't want to undergo unless I absolutely have to. So I've been managing it in other ways. But I was very happy to see, I went and saw a new doctor recently, and we did a new MRI so he could take a look at my spine and my lumbar region. And he started by kind of going over it in summary. And he was looking at my discs and he's like, oh, at 57, actually, your discs are pretty well hydrated and look pretty healthy. And he looked at the muscles that are supporting the spine. He said, those look nice and healthy. That tells me that you've been leading an active life and looking out for your health. So I felt pretty good. But even despite that, I have pain. And I only can imagine that it could have happened sooner, or maybe I'd be experiencing more pain if I hadn't maintained my fitness, and if things weren't looking as good as they did down there. So anyhow, something that is no fun, and I would not wish on my worst enemy. If you make it to 60, you're likely to live another 25 years. So you want to get there in as good a shape as possible, because if your quality of life sucks starting at 60, can you imagine living in pain for another 25 years? I can't. I may end up that way. I mean, it happens to a lot of people, but I'm going to do everything I can to try and avoid that. And then ultimately, the fitness that you keep yourself in, your maintaining a healthy weight, will determine how long you're able to maintain your independence. We've seen this both with my parents and my in-laws, where basically what drove them to go into a home was when they got to an age that they couldn't get around, they were too heavy to get out of bed themselves and things like that. They come from a different era, so they really didn't ever worry about weight or fitness or anything like that, like my wife and I do. And it definitely took a toll. I mean, you could see that was the decision-making factor. It's like they could have lived independently up until the time that caught up with them. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found the video helpful. If you have any questions at all, please post them in the comments, and I'll do my best to help in any way that I can. And if I can make one request, please, 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 please share my content with others, leave a review in the comments, like and subscribe. These are the things that cause the algorithms to push my content out to more and more people so I can help them too.
It's your world and I'm just a squirrel trying to get a nut to move your butt.
Please subscribe now. You know you want to. And why not go nuts and set notifications on so you'll be notified every time I put out new content.